Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm doing my September TBR. As you may recall, I was reading nothing but classic horror stories in September. I had 7 on the list, and I did kind of get through all of them, but we'll get to that in just a minute. In all honesty, I actually ended up DNFing 2 of these. So I went 9 months without DNFing a book, like 40 books I went through this year so far. And I ended up DNFing 2. I'm so sad about it. I don't like to DNF, but I was not enjoying these 2 at all. So we will get to those first, and then I'll work my way up from the ones I enjoyed the least that I actually did finish up to my favorites of the month. So let's get started. So my first DNF of the month and of the entire year is The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. I really tried with this one, y'all. This was like the 5th book I read for the month, so I was on a roll. I thought I was doing really good. So if you recall in my September TBR, I was worried that I wasn't going to enjoy a lot of these because they intimidate me. The way the stories are written, the sentence structures, the language, it was all different back in the 1800s. And I was really worried that I wasn't going to enjoy most of these, but luckily I did enjoy most of them. However, this one was not one of them. I really tried with this one. After about 3 pages, I was like, I'm going to need some help. So I found an audio on YouTube, and I was listening to that while reading along. And that did help me, but it was not enough to keep my interest. I read about half of this, and I just had no idea what was going on. Every sentence was like nails on a chalkboard, honestly. They were so long and so just, I don't even know the word for it. But let me just turn to any page and I'm sure that I can show you what I'm talking about, okay? So every sentence was like, yet if I had not indulged to prove there was nothing in it, in this review, I should have missed the 2 or 3 dim elements of comfort that still remain to me. What? Come again. This one, I mean, all these sentences were super long. It took, of course, more than that particular passage to place us together in presence of what we had now to live with as we could. My dreadful liability to impressions of the order so vividly exemplified, and my companion's knowledge henceforth, a knowledge half consternation and half compassion of that liability. I had no idea what was going on in this. I can't follow stories like this, and it's supposed to be one of the most popular haunted house books, haunted ghost story books ever written. It's a classic. I hated it though. I really couldn't. I really tried though. So the second book I DNF'd this month is going to be a collection of short stories by Shirley Jackson called The Lottery and Other Stories. I really had high expectations for this. I started with The Lottery, which I had read back in like middle school, high school, somewhere around there. And it is the last story in this book. And I was like, I need to start with that so I don't spend the whole time reading it just trying to get to The Lottery. So The Lottery was really good. It's not all that horrific. I mean, it is implied, and it's just a really good read. So then I started at the beginning, and after the first one, I was like, what? What was that about? Then the second story was the same reaction. I was thinking, what is the point of that story? You know? So I actually read, I think it was 17 out of the 25 short stories in this collection. None of them were creepy or horrific or even that weird, like maybe Twilight Zone-ish, nothing like that. I was very bored with this. It was so bad. I think I got overall like 55% through, and I just couldn't bore myself anymore. There was just a few days left in the month, and I was like, I'm done. I just can't. So that was my second DNF of the month and of the year. So of the 5 stories that I actually did finish, they weren't all that bad, but the one I enjoyed the least, I gave 3 stars to. was The Lord of the Flies by William Golding. So some people might not consider this an actual horror story, but I disagree. I mean, it's about a group of British schoolboys, all from different ages, that get shipwrecked on this island. There are no other adults around, it's just them. I'm a sucker for a good island horror story. And although there are some horrific elements in this, a few of them actually do die. One disappears, never to be seen again. But after like 3/4 of the way through, I was kind of done. I was like, we need to just get to the end of this. I didn't really like any of the characters, even the main character who spends most of his time wanting to get off the island and trying to create this fire signal on top of the mountain in case a boat is traveling by or whatnot. But most of the boys just quickly turn into savages and follow this other guy. And they're really not concerned about getting off the island. They're enjoying themselves in their anarchy ways. This is another one that I read back in school days, a long time ago. I didn't remember much about it. September was a long month apparently, because it seems like I read this one ages ago. But yeah, it wasn't my favorite. Next was one that I had previously read a few years ago. I think it was the end of 2017. And I gave it 2 stars back then, but I bumped it up to 3 stars this time. That is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. And I think everybody knows what this story is about. It is about a scientist who creates this potion to bring out his evil side, and he's able to switch back and forth in between his 2 personas. Mr. Hyde is all bad. Dr. Jekyll is a mixture of good and bad. So there's not just one side of him that's completely good. And I think that's part of the theme of this, is like, no good person is as good as you might think. But after his evil side is released for so long, he begins to change without even wanting to, and it becomes a problem. I had a good time with this one. I thought it was a really good story. I really would have loved to have read something like this and not know the twist. But with it being over 100 years old, if you don't know the story by now, I'm sorry I just ruined it for you. But yeah, it's a good read. Very short. Yeah, 3 stars. Okay, these last 3 books, I might get some flack for my ordering of them maybe. But, you know, it is what it is. They were all written in the 1800s. So the next one I enjoyed the most was Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I'm so glad I read this one finally. It is much different than what I kind of anticipated. I've never seen like any movie adaptation of Frankenstein, but everyone kind of knows the gist. So there's this scientist who decides to play God and create a living person. Okay, so this story does not go into specifics about how he is able to do so, but it does show that he instantly regrets it once his monster awakens, because he's so hideous and he can't believe he has done this to the world, and so he immediately runs from the creature. And then it's like a few years pass before he comes in contact with it again. And so the monster just wants to be accepted, but Victor wants nothing to do with him. Society doesn't want anything to do with him. Anyone that comes across him freaks out and tries to, I guess, kill him. They attack him, drive him out from wherever he is staying. But yeah, this was a really enjoyable read. I gave it 3.5 stars, rounded up to 4 on Goodreads, so don't come after me. I know this is a lot of people's favorite classic story. I didn't really get bored. There was a section I thought was kind of boring, but you know, it's a classic for a reason, and I completely understand why someone would love this. The drawing on this one, it's a cool cover, don't get me wrong, but that's kind of a monstrous pretty boy face, and that is not what Frankenstein's monster is. Victor Frankenstein is the scientist and the monster doesn't really have a name, but it's like society has adapted the name Frankenstein to the monster. Whatever. I guess it's kind of like one and the same now. A lot of these stories, this one, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and the next one I'm going to talk about, deals a lot with like oneself and the good and bad inside of them that's conflicting all the time. And so with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, it was obviously that was the way it was. But in Frankenstein, it's like two different personas. One's alive, one's dead, but alive. I don't know. They all kind of had similar themes, but I really enjoyed it, and I think it's worth the read. I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed this next one, and I really didn't expect it to be above Frankenstein, but I'm talking about The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I really loved the characters in this story. I think it might have something to do with the homoeroticism between between Dorian Gray, the painter who is painting this picture. His name was Basil, and then Basil's friend, Lord Henry. Basil is painting this portrait of Dorian, and Dorian is like a 20-year-old pretty boy, and he's so charming and handsome, but he's kind of naive, and Lord Henry is introduced to him while Basil is painting the portrait, and Basil's putting everything he has into this portrait, okay? So it's like the best work he's ever done. But once Lord Henry meets Dorian, he takes a fascination with him. Both of the men do. They're like 10 years older than him, but they are both seemingly very attracted to him, even though they're all straight. So Lord Henry explains to Dorian how beauty is everything, and one day you're not going to be so beautiful, and it really freaks Dorian out to the point where he cries out after seeing the portrait and how beautiful it is, that it's not fair that the way he looks in the portrait will never change, but he will get older and wrinkled and lose his looks and youth, and he basically screams out, I would sell my soul to have the picture, have all this stuff happen to the picture and myself retain my beauty and youth. And basically that's what happens. That's all it takes to make a deal with the devil, I guess. But this was a really good story. It wasn't all that horrific, although it does have a few tense moments, a few horrific images, descriptions. But overall, I really, really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. So my absolute favorite book that I read for the month, my favorite classic I've ever read, I guess, would be Bram Stoker's Dracula. Yes, of course. I really enjoyed this one. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I probably should have given it 5, but it was a little long-winded, especially Van Helsing, who just, every time the man spoke, he would just go on and on and on and on and on for pages sometimes, and I think that's probably why I just gave it 4 stars. But it's a really good horror story, okay? It's about Dracula, and I've seen the movie, the 1992-3 film, Bram Stoker's Dracula, starring Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder, and I enjoyed that one okay. I think I enjoyed the book a lot better because Mina, who was played by Winona Ryder, I didn't like the way she was portrayed in the movie all that much, but this is a really good story. It's a story told through letters between Mina and Lucy, diary entries from them, as well as Jonathan and a doctor, I forget his name. Now, it's been a few weeks since I read it, but yeah, this is a really good story. The length of this really deceived me because it took me well over a week to read this whole thing. I think in hardback print, it's probably like 600 pages. This one was close to 400. But yeah, it was worth a read. I didn't really get all that bored with it, so really enjoyed it. Dracula. So those are all the books that I read or DNF'd in the month of September. I'm so glad I got through the classics because I was really burned out by the time the end of the month came around and I just wanted it to be over. So I'm ready to dive into my spooky reads, my Halloween reads. Super excited for that. I think it'll be a nice change of pace after reading nothing but classic literature for a whole month. So yeah, that was my month. What was your month like? What was your favorite read of September? I would love to know. Let me know down in the comments which of these classic books are your favorites. Is it Frankenstein? Is it Dracula? Possibly Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? I would love to know. If you've not read any of these, let me know that too. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, a great spooky October, and I will see you in the next one.